UCLA begins its quest for a 12th national basketball title. The Rams bring back a corner for a third consecutive season, and turns out Cameron Brink's complaint about men practicing with the Sparks is a total nontroversy. Good morning. I'm James, and this is your daily dose of sports and snark for the greatest sports city in the world, Los Angeles. This is the faithful Angelenos Morning Report. It's March 20th, 2025. One more day on the road before I finally get to go back home, and I totally can't wait. Do you like being in the know about LA sports? Well, if you do, click the like button. Click the subscribe button. There's a notification bell. Hit that. It'll let you know when we drop new content. Sharing is caring. Let people know we exist. And by all means, comment. Now, before we go through the news and notes, a look at the scoreboard. The Lakers defeated Denver last night, 120-108. Meanwhile, UCLA is going to play Utah State tonight. Approximate start time, 6:25 in the first round of the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about that a little more in a moment. Milwaukee is at the Lakers at 7:30, and the Kings are at Chicago at 5:30. What do you say we get to the news? Mick Cronin, on the eve of the NCAA tournament, finally got a chance to appreciate where the Bruins are. And that matters because, of course, UCLA, a perennial basketball power, a blue blood, didn't qualify for the tournament at all last year. He told the Scribes, quote, "It's good to be back in March Madness. Last year was a tough year for us, so we're extremely excited to be here. It was a long process getting back. I'd say about 40 days of no sleep for me last spring putting this team together," unquote. But he also added two pretty important points. That while getting hot at the right time matters, quote, "defense travels," unquote. Those are the two big takeaways as UCLA begins its quest for a 12th title. Why? Well, if you've seen the Bruins at all this year, UCLA has been pretty damn streaky. They've had a 7-game winning streak. They've also lost 4 consecutive games. Teams that win national titles don't do that. And I mean, if you've been saying, guys, UCLA has to be a top 25 ranked team, you can't be that when you go on 4-game losing streaks. You can't. I mean, people who vote in rankings, they love consistency. They love to slot teams. And if you're just going on a week plus long losing streak, they don't know where to put you. So they don't. Speaking of consistency, that's what they're going to need from leading scorer Tyler Bilodeau and top rebounder Kobe Johnson. It's not that they have to force the issue. It just has to be, they have to be locked in. You know, that whole cliche about letting the game come to them. So, the question remains, after last week's loss in the Big Ten tournament to Wisconsin, which was an effective outside shooting team, have they solved that problem in time against Utah State, because Utah State is an effective outside shooting team? In other words, the second part, does defense travel? If defense travels and mid-major Utah State gets freaked out by being on the big stage of the NCAA tournament, then UCLA wins going away. If getting hot at the right time matters, then Utah State's in the fight. Now, for today's game, my gut tells me that Cronin had a week, an entire week, to make adjustments after the Wisconsin rout for a team that plays somewhat similar. That's one. 2, the analytics say UCLA's defense forces a lot of turnovers. And then my mind tells me that Utah State simply doesn't have the talent level of a Wisconsin, nor do they have the talent level of a UCLA. Not that I never recommend going to Vegas and plopping down money, but that's where I'm leaning. UCLA winning tonight As recently as yesterday, we were talking about what matters to the Rams when building a defense. We talked a lot about how they pretty much don't give a damn about linebackers. And defensive back, they kind of care, but they just put that on the back burner. Look, the Rams kind of look at defensive backs as the 1:30 a.m. chick in the back of the bar. The one you don't slobber all over when it's prime time, but like you're kind of desperate and you want to come home with somebody, and there she is, attracting the flies in the corner. You damn sure don't take somebody like that to meet the parents. You don't brag to your pals. It's an unfortunate part of society, but that's the way it is. So the Rams, if you look at their draft history, they take tons of flyers on defensive backs in day 3. And I bring that up also because the Rams are bringing back cornerback Ahkello Witherspoon on a 1-year deal. This would make his 3rd year in Los Angeles. So, am I going to sit there and tell you this is a big win for the Rams? No. But don't be surprised if this caps off the Rams' attention to defensive backs at all. You'll see all these mock drafts where the Rams take the best cornerback available in the first, right? I think they're going to trade down. This is my guess. I'm going to think if they can trade out of the first round, they totally will. And then take those extra picks and draft a bunch of defensive backs in rounds 5 through 7. Again. The off season is pretty much going to be what the Rams traditionally like to do. TMZ is reporting that the Sparks will vet any men who will practice with the team. This is in response to part-time forward, full-time attention seeker Cameron Brink going on her podcast and claiming that if the men aren't gay, then she would be icked out. The men have to be gay or she is icked out. Now, terrible thing to say, I might add. Especially in public. You should be taking that to your bosses in private. And by the way, don't mention that you have to work around a bunch of gay men. There's nothing wrong with being gay. That's not my point. My point is that you can't just blast people in public when you don't know them. Here's what makes the story really insidious to me. This isn't the first time that the Sparks have needed male practice squad players. They've apparently done so since year 1, since before Cameron Brink was born. By the way, if they've done so since year 1, that means that they might have needed male practice players last year. Now, this is the first time we've ever heard of it. Cameron. And why? Presumably, we haven't heard of it for so many years because there hasn't been a problem for that many years. Moreover, you can find social media posts, not just from the Sparks asking for dudes to run a few laps with the Sparks to D up so they have somebody to work against. Other WNBA teams needed them. Dallas and Phoenix advertised for male basketball players for practice. And by the way, women's college basketball teams do it as well. So when this nontroversy first broke, I was telling you guys that this was once again about Cameron Brink wanting to be in the headlines. You can only post so many thirst trap pics before people go, okay, we get it, you're pretty. We get it. I was saying that if you really had a problem with this, if you're a player, a female player that really has a problem practicing against men, you don't complain about it to a podcast on your podcast. You go to HR. You go to human resources. So if anything, it's not that she should be icked out by male practice players because obviously the Sparks have been vetting them. What should have us icked out is somebody this desperate for attention. There are people who watch this podcast, love and appreciate every one of you. But they say, geez, James, why do you keep going after Cameron Brink like this? It's because of her insatiable desire for attention. It's because she's trying to be an influencer. And influencers are terrible people. Influencers are terrible people. They start off by doing relatively benign things like setting up a camera and dancing in front of it to whatever song is popular. And when that stops working, they do more things. They start taking it public. They start pranking people without their permission. And the pranks are never funny. It's always, hey, let me knock that bag of eggs out of your arm that you just spent a half of your rent money just so you could eat. Ha ha ha. They film people without their permission. You see it at the gym all the time. Get out of my shot. I'm about to show off my ass and Spanx. Generally, influencers go around ruining people's days and then eventually ruining the reputations of innocent people. In the span of a year, Cameron Brink went from, hey everybody, look at my legs, to how dare these creeps on the court look at my legs. And we don't even know if they're looking at her legs. And she doesn't even have to do any of this influencer crap because unlike millions of TikTokers, she has a job. She's a professional athlete. So, yeah. Males practicing with the Sparks and in the WNBA and in college, women's college basketball has been a thing for decades. Cameron Brink complained about it because she wanted to be in the headlines, which makes her a terrible person. When people see my wife, the comment I most often get is, how? And I know what it means. They are just so dumbstruck that a hideous, opinionated chode such as myself managed to land a wife, particularly one that's attractive. It leads them so confounded that they are rendered completely speechless to finish the question. Because the question they want to ask is not, how? It's, how did he land her? And then they stare vacantly into this existential void. Is there a just God? Because a just God would allow this, really? And then having determined that maybe there's not a God, they go in the opposite direction. They go, wait a second, this disproves natural selection because nobody that fine would hook up with somebody that disgusting. I bring all of this up because that explains the marriage of Rodney Peete and Holly Robinson. If you went back to the late 1980s, early 90s, there were very few women as gorgeous as Holly Robinson. Man, that girl's pretty. For me to land my wife, I had to perform as a comic across the country. I had to write 2 novels. I was in the best shape of my life at the time. I volunteered for charities. I wore a suit every day. That attracted my wife. To land Holly Robinson, Rodney Peete had to play quarterback for USC and in the NFL. Now, granted, he played for the Detroit Lions, but it's still technically the NFL. And in order to keep said scorch cake happy, you have to show years later that you can, as the kids say, be an alpha. So, Rodney Peete took his wife to Japan. Rodney Peete got damn good seats at the Tokyo Dome for a Dodger game. And then Rodney Peete stole a foul ball away from Max Muncy on national TV. Holly Robinson went to social media and apologized to the Dodgers, saying her husband was trying to keep her from getting hit by a baseball. Muncy was a little miffed when he saw what happened. But then he looked at Holly Robinson, then looked at Rodney Peete and said, how? We spend a lot of time talking USC recruiting, which makes sense because the Trojans have made a lot of moves. If you are wondering about where UCLA stands in terms of football recruiting and prospect rankings, it's kind of hilarious. The Bruins have 4 commitments. All 4 are wide receivers. And yet the Bruins are ranked 33rd in the nation. To which we can all ask, how? But you let me know what you think in the comments thread. Talk to me, for example, about your thoughts for UCLA basketball in March Madness. Or for that matter, talk to me about the Rams cornerback situation. Or if you think it was cool for Brink to bury a bunch of randos on her podcast. And if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe to Faithful Angelenos. We talk LA sports every single day here. Thank you for watching. I'm James. We'll be back tomorrow. Faithful Angelenos is a Kian Corte El Queso production. Take care.